And today I'll try to speak a bit about my learnings from soft launch to worldwide launch for mobile games. There are various ways this information can be presented. In today's presentation, I will try to focus more on the operational side rather than the business or marketing. But I do have some insights from business. Let's see. Before getting into the actual presentation, a little bit about me. So I started my professional career at McAfee as a programmer. And then moved on to working at a gaming company called Zynga back in the day in 2010. When I was a programmer, I realized that programming is not my calling and didn't want to see myself doing for the rest of my life. QA felt like a natural transition from programming, and a friend of mine had just joined Zynga. And they were very, very popular on Facebook, making Farmville, Cityville, and all those kinds of games. Zynga opened their offices in India. I joined Zynga as a QA, worked there for 3 years, and moved to Finland in 2013, and started my next job at Ubisoft. They had recently acquired a studio called Red Links. I joined Ubisoft, worked there for 7 years, and then moved on to Rovio. 2 years into Rovio, I moved to Metacore in January of 2023, and have been at Metacore for over a year now. From education side, I have an engineering degree in computer science. That speaks for my first job as a programmer. I originally come from a very small town in the foothills of Himalayas from the Indian state of Uttarakhand, and have been living in Finland for over 10 years in the city of Espoo, which is one of the cities in the capital region of Finland, if you have been to the country, with my husband and our 2 kids. A bit about my gaming portfolio. So I started my career, as I said, at Zynga on a game called Fishville, and I was the QA on this project. The way Zynga India was structured was to support live operations for Zynga. So the games were made in US, and then they were transitioned to India for live operations. The idea behind that was that the India studio will become the lead for live operations, and everything when it comes to live game would be handled in India. So I joined the team, and then they were transitioning the other game at the same time. So my then manager asked me if I could step up and make sure that the content treadmill was running fine, releases were going on time. I took up that role and started making sure that the releases were going on schedule. A couple of months into that, he asked me if I wanted to be a producer. I had no idea what he meant. He said, it seems that whatever you're doing, you seem to be enjoying it, and that's what a producer does. And hesitantly, I took up the role, and rest is history. So I became producer on Treasure Isle as my first project, moved on to doing 2 more projects at Zynga, a PvP game and a castle building game, until 2013 when we moved to Finland. So up until now, my experience was mostly on Facebook, but now this was the first time I was working on a mobile title. Trials had just been soft launched. The Red Link studio was known for its Trials IP, and this was the first time they were releasing a mobile game with Ubisoft and also a Trials game. I joined this team during the soft launch. They were supposed to go live in a few months. After I joined the team, the game went live. I worked on it for a couple of years until moving on to the next title. This was the game that we were making with South Park and not for South Park, in case you know the IP, with Matt and Trey. They were checking the builds regularly. We were interacting them on a regular basis. And this one particular project is very close to my heart because this was where I learned the various stages of development. So I was on this project from conception to pre-production to production to launch to live ops. I did everything on this project for the next 5 years at Ubisoft until I went on my first maternity, returned back to work on South Park, and decided to do something else and joined Rovio. This was one of their oldest projects. They were trying to revive it back in the day, and I joined the team. They had ported the game from their own engine to Unity. They were starting to write their backend again. I worked on this for 6 months, went on second maternity, came back, joined their latest launch, worked on it for a few months, and joined Metacore. So in a nutshell, this is what I have been doing in the industry for over 12 years now. I've been quite fortunate to have worked on different kind of games, different kind of genres, and different kind of platforms. But most of my learning when it comes to soft launch comes from these 2 projects, because these were the ones where I saw this entire cycle of moving a game from soft launch to worldwide. And what are the things that we need to make sure that you have a successful launch after soft launch? When we are making games, the end objective is to have a successful launch and have a viable business case at the end of the day. And soft launch plays a very, very important role for the team when they're prepping for launch. Most of you probably here are already familiar what a soft launch is, but in case you aren't, soft launch is the first release of the game strategically targeting your core geographic locations and emphasizing long-term monetization strategies. It involves studying the behavior of your initial users, discerning what aspects of your app engage them and where they encounter challenges. It also is during this phase of the game development that you start looking at your data more diligently. You start establishing your success criteria for your key performance indicators, your D1, D3, D7, D30, and beyond, if you have that already in the game, and also start looking at the game from the lens of monetization and other important metrics. This is to ensure that there's a firm understanding of game's performance from user engagement, monetization, and retention metrics. Hopefully, by the time the team is entering soft launch, they have enough in the game up until D30, because soft launch is your most engaged users, and they will eat up your content before you realize. So I hope that the teams who are working on soft launch know that they need to have content at least until D30 and even beyond to get the relevant data. It's also a phase where you already have a working structure. You have a foundation, then you've built a structure on that with during your prototyping, your alphas, and your betas. And this is the time you're further evolving the game. So you continue to include features, but this time it's more data-driven because you have data from the launch. You already have insights from your players and also from data to develop the game further. And last but not the least, something that has become super important right now is you start also measuring your ROAS. You start measuring how your marketing is going to test and how they're going to perform at the worldwide launch. There was probably a time when marketing could be a separate entity of its own and the game teams could do whatever they want and they can run independently. That's no longer the trend. That's no longer a viable solution. The teams have to work together and ROAS has to be included in one of your core metrics moving forward towards the worldwide launch. Just like any other phase for game development, soft launch is a very interesting phase, especially from business point of view. And because it's a new phase, it has its own fair share of demands. And I think one of the biggest one, at least in my opinion, that the game team needs to develop is having a live ops mindset. The game before this has been developed, played by a small set of individual developers. You probably have run your playtest, your focus area studies, and everything that you could do to gain knowledge on the business case that you are trying to build for the game. But now the game is out live. It's out live to not, if not to thousands, hundreds of users during your initial phases of your soft launch, and probably even thousands later on. And you're competing against the real games. You're not competing against only soft launch games, but you're competing against a much wider market in wherever you have agreed to soft launch. And you're starting to get real-time data, starting to get feedback from your players, your community, and customer support. They're all starting to thrive. So the team also the teams needs to switch their gears to being a live team. What it means in practice is that you should have an understanding of what does it mean to operate a game in the live environment. What kind of support tools would you need? What kind of SLAs do you have? How do you get data, meaningful data, and how are you able to take actions on those? All these questions should already be asked during soft launch and not once you go live, because once you go live, if you are lucky, the game is going to be a huge success, and then you really have to choose your battles, and it doesn't happen overnight that you switch gears and you're like, okay, now we are live, let's start working as a live game. This is a mindset that the team needs to develop, because making a game and running a game are two different ball games. They're very, very different from each other, require different skills, different temperament, and the team who's working towards a launch, and in this case, a soft launch, at this point of time, should develop that mindset, what they would need eventually if everything goes as planned and the game becomes a hit. Data, as I said, becomes an important part of the team during soft launch. You start getting real-time data, you start analyzing your data, and probably up until now, the decisions that are made for the game are based on focus group studies, competitor analysis, play test, or whatever way you have found to get your data. And sometimes it could even be hunches and feelings, which are not unheard of in this industry. Now is the time when you have real data to take informed and educated decisions. You probably have people on your team who can read this data for you, and utilizing all those skills and the data that you have gathered, the team can make informed and educated decisions going forward. This helps in better planning and also better understanding of the product during soft launch, and helps hopefully drive engagement as well. I know a lot of people in general, in the beginning of the game development, are averse to the idea of having processes. It's not a term that a lot of game developers enjoy if you say that we are going to add some processes. But it also becomes vital during soft launch that you start defining what your processes or what your ways of working are going to be. Processes are meant for people. People are not meant for processes. So you can build your structure, your foundation, and your framework based on this. Agree among your team members based on what are your ways of working, what kind of experience people do you have, what kind of people you have on the team. Agree on your ways of working, how you're going to react when you start getting data, when you start getting feedback, what is the process, how are you going to develop your features, what is the pipeline you are going to follow, and how will you share information internally and externally. It can be very, very lightweight during soft launch, but you have to start thinking in those lines that you need a structure to operate eventually as a live game. And the processes also help you streamline tasks and facilitate transition, easiest transition, and improves the efficiency of the team overall. Having said all of this, still has to be the agility and the iteration that you probably had during prototyping and early stages of the game development. But emphasis has to be paid to quality at this point of time in your project. You can no longer afford to ship a build that crashes on launch. You can no longer have features that are not balanced completely. So there are a lot of things that have to be looked at from the lens of quality, but at the same time maintaining the iterativeness and the agility, because the product still has to prove to be a viable business solution going forward. But with all of this said, you need to make sure that the game is developing at a pace that you would like it to be, and you continue to validate your business case during the soft launch. And because we're talking of live ops, and because we're talking of how do we make games scale up really quickly after launch, and what does success mean for a game when they're out there, when we launched Merge Mansion 3 years ago, it was an instant hit. It became successful at a level that was not imagined by anybody on the team. And it continued to be successful. But we realized that if we had better tooling in place, we would have been able to utilize those tools and scale up the business much faster than we eventually did. The game is continuing to do well, and it hopes to do well in the future as well. But not having proper tools to support the live operations for a game of that size really hurt us in the long run. The live operations success relies essentially on your tools. You probably want during your soft launch that you have enough relevant tools for your team to operate. Your product managers, if they want to run any sort of test, events, offers, etc., they should have enough tooling that they're able to do it without hampering the development pipeline. And also, you do not want to have client-side deployment for every little release. So building those tools that facilitate this faster execution is something that should be a focus for the team during soft launch. How your customer support is going to react to the tickets they get. Do they need to bug a programmer every time they need to look at a player blog? Do they have to make changes to manually to the player entries? Probably not. You start thinking of building those tools as well. And how your community runs the engagement during in the platform. So a lot of things comes into play when it comes to tool. And we are working in an industry where we're serving game as a service. Our games are service, and we have to adapt to that ways of working and that model that we are operating with that approach. And tools play an instrumental role in taking that approach forward. And they can also serve dual purposes for you. So you can build tools for live operations, which is most of your team is going to use. And also you can build tools for your development, improving the quality of life for your team, and it improves overall efficiency for the team. The other topic that comes up every now and then is how do you scale up your teams during soft launch? Because the team is much smaller before launch. You would like to scale your teams faster during soft launch so you can launch the games with every possible resource on the team. I've been on games where soft launches were a few months. I have been on games where soft launches were over 3 years. And there's no right and wrong answer, but at least one thing that's clear for me is you have to be very, very strategic on how you scale up your teams. There are certain roles that will help you go forward with better decision-making and informed decisions if you have them on team already during soft launch. Your product managers, your data analysts, your specific skilled designers. If you're making a combat game, you definitely need a combat designer who can help you balance the game during soft launch. And to an extent, your tool programmer if you need one. If you don't have a centralized team that's doing that for you. Having these roles is extremely, extremely crucial. Not having these skills on the team during soft launch will not give you enough relevance and data going forward. And if you don't have these roles, it could be that you end up taking decisions that might not be fruitful for the project in the long run. On the other side, though, if you end up scaling your teams much faster, there is a chance that you start deviating from your original vision, because when you get people on teams, people have different priorities. And with different priorities, you get different kind of questions asked. And that could overshadow your main vision for the project on what you're set out to achieve. So it's important to be very, very strategic, hire for the right roles at the right time, and make sure that you still are very much aligned on your vision, what you have set out to achieve as a team from the beginning. Also an opportunity to start collaborating with your central departments if you have any in your company. Or the organization that you're part of. There are a lot of things that you need to do during soft launch, and start aligning your strategies with your central department. So if you have a technical department, see if they can help you facilitate with the tool development. Check with your marketing if they've started the conversations with the app stores. And as I said earlier, like marketing and games have to work together. You need to have like a solid marketing strategy, because you don't only need a great game for a game to be successful, but you also need equally good marketing for the game to be successful. So make sure that alignment is already present during soft launch. There are two topics that keep coming up and often debatable are localization and automation. How do you go about that during soft launch? I personally believe that both of these, if possible, should be looked at during soft launch. Localization for two reasons. The first is because you are in soft launch and you are testing the game out there with a huge audience, you would like to test your game in non-English speaking territories. English speaking territories are probably the main market for most of the games, but then there are also countries which have high potential for business that are non-English speaking. So would like to test that during soft launch. And second, the amount of work it takes to get localization for certain languages in the game. Not to name the languages, but we know that there are some that have major issues with how the UIs are built and how the programming effort goes into making sure that the text is not overflowing. You would like to tackle all of this before soft launch so that you are able to choose your battles better once you are live. Automation is very, very debatable. When I started at Zynga in 2010, we already had automation back in the day, and it felt like such a natural and obvious choice to have for your games. But in the last 10 years, I have not seen much automation happening. I believe that our QAs, our testers, our quality people, they are much, much smarter than asking them to do the redundant checks for smoke testing or release testing. We should spend their time into important parts of testing, and that's probably dev testing that they should be focusing on. And any sort of help that could be provided to improve the quality of the build, to improve their work quality of life at work, could be looked at. And you don't have to do it yourself. If you have centralized team, you can ask for their assistance to do this. And last but not the least, once your game gets out there, becomes a huge success as you want it to be, you want to make sure that you are able to scale up your infrastructure as quickly as possible. And those tests should already be performed. The load test and the technical test should already take place during the soft launch. Having said all of this, please be mindful of a few things. It's important to keep your focus during soft launch and continue to validate the business case. There's a lot happens during soft launch. There's a lot of data coming your way. There are a lot of comments and feedback coming your way. It's important that the team is able to maintain its focus and monitoring its KPI on regular basis. During soft launch, because you're constantly evaluating the game and you're developing it further, make sure your core is still working. Your core is not broken by adding endless amount of features during soft launch. Keep asking yourself, is the game still fun to play? Because if it's not fun to the team, it's not fun for anyone to play out there. So remember that. That is super important to keep evaluating that. There are a lot of targets also that move during soft launch. At any given time, your engagement could be your metric that you're working towards. It could be monetization at another time, and it could be ROAS at a different time. So learn how do you navigate between all of these, because they all are equally important, but you can't address them at the same time. So learn how you're going to navigate between them. And there are a lot of distractions that could come your way with the feedback or somebody telling you, hey, this is the feature that we are working on. Would you like to include it? Learn how do you take those feedback and implement that into your game. So as a quick summary, it's the most important phase in the development of a game, especially from the business side. Stay focused, continue to validate your business case, have clear targets, develop a live ops mindset, scale strategically, hire people, right people at the right time, and keep evaluating the enjoyability of your game. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we have time for 1, 2, or maybe 3 questions. Do you have any questions about soft launch, about this difficult stage of different games? No, any question? I'm sure you have. Okay, I have my own question.
Yes.
In your opinion, what metrics are most important at soft launch? You tell us about classic days, 1, 3, 7, 30, but what metrics are most important? Is it retention or monetization metrics? What is your opinion on that point?
Yeah, I think, as I said, I think they're all important at different phases. During soft launch, you want to make sure that you are hitting your day one retention, depending on the kind of game you have. Like, for example, we have casual games, and our D1 is roughly maybe above 50 is what we expect our games to have. So depending on at what are you trying to test, it depends, but they are all probably equally important. When you start looking at your marketing strategies, like, for example, at some point, I remember in one of the games I was working, the go to launch would happen only if you have a D30 ROAS of 25%. So it really depends on how, like, what metric is being evaluated. But at least your basic metrics, acquisition, retention, monetization, and the benchmarks that you have for the kind of game you are making, they're industry benchmarks. At least having all of those in place would be super, super important.
Okay, thank you for the answer. And do you have any questions? Yes, we have some questions. Wait for my microphone, sorry.
I wanted to ask, so we were talking about soft launch, but if we are launching the game in the early access, is very similar to the soft launch for the service game?
Yeah.
Is all those rules are very similar when we are, yeah, okay, just.
Yeah, I think early access is only on Android, if I remember correctly. iOS doesn't offer early access.
Yeah, but the game could be also on the Steam.
Yes, yes, it's the same. It's the same thing, I think. I think the idea is that if your game is played by hundreds of users, you have to start behaving as if like it's a game that's available for even more amount of users.
Okay, thank you. And last questions.
Can you highlight like the most critical mistake that you can make during soft launch?
Yeah, I think well, there are many you can make, but the one that comes to mind now, let's say out of the top 5 or 10, is that the game is no longer fun to play. Like, you are losing the core of the game, which is super, super important. Like, we know that there are games that probably are not fully polished when they go out, but because they are fun to play, players are going to play. But if you put out like the most polished product out there, and it's no longer fun to play, nobody's going to play, whatever the amount of money you can put on it in your UA to scale it up. So it's really, really important that the core feels fun, that the game feels like this is something where I want to spend my time and hopefully money into.
Yeah, it's like if you look only on the metrics and you don't play the game, like you don't get with it. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for your answers, for your speech, and I think we're done. Thank you.